by way of brief introduction, I genuinely don't think that these people need introducing to you. I'm sure they're all very familiar. At the far end, Renae Trimble. So Renae is the Chief Executive Officer of Accor Plus, which is Accor's global loyalty program. She's been at Accor for 15 years. Was appointed to that role only in February this year, but in that capacity she's looking after 360,000 members across 20 countries, 1,400 participating hotels. I'm also delighted that Renae joined our board.
Feel free to join if you're not.
Renae joined our board in early this year and has been an enormously valuable contributor. Next to Renae, Jason de Sousa, who's the Executive Director of Lendlease in Australia. In that role, he's really focused on originating large-scale property and infrastructure projects. Before Lendlease, Jason may have been familiar to some of you as in holding senior policy and leadership roles at both state and Commonwealth levels of government. He also has been a director of the Waterfront company much since inception, and again, an enormously valuable contributor. Michael, I think has been introduced 14 times already today, but Michael, delighted to have you, and congratulations on your now statutory additional responsibility.
Hasn't passed Parliament yet.
He keeps getting loaded up with more things, so he must be doing some things right. And last but not least, Eamon. As you know, Eamon runs the Committee for Sydney in his second stint there, and in all capacities, in his stint in investment attraction in between, has been a staunch supporter and contributor to this whole investment district story, not least back at the Committee for Sydney bringing Julie Grail out back in 2018, which really was quite instrumental in progressing the conversation. So I might, I'll start off asking each of you an appropriately leading question, and we'll see how we go with the available time. But perhaps, Eamon, you're closest, and I'll start with you. You've been very much part of this conversation from the get-go, and it intrigues me, and we talk about it often, why it seems to have taken Australia as long as it has to come to the party. I mean, improvement districts have been operating effectively since the 1950s in other parts of the world, and the committee produced a report not too long ago, that, particularly into the nighttime economy, but amongst its recommendations, pretty much all of which have been already implemented.
One left, right?
One left, yeah. Why do you think that's?
That's a great question. So, sorry, the one left is business improvement districts, to implement legislation for business improvement districts. I think part of it is that we've got 3 levels of government, so there's a sense of, well, surely someone can do this stuff within government, but clearly we know that the fundamental purpose of an improvement district, whether it's community or business, is that it's not government, that it's actually the participants in that precinct, bottom up, identifying the opportunities that they want. I think that there's been complacency, particularly in Sydney and New South Wales, that we are the number 1 city in Australia, and we're probably the number 1 city in the Southern Hemisphere. And so, we can kind of do a pretty average job on a lot of different areas of reform and still be fine. But that era is coming to an end. The future success of prosperity for Australia, not to get too sort of grandiose, but it will be about attractiveness. It will be about our ability to attract smart, talented people and money. And so we can't rest on our laurels, on our natural assets, on our underlying, quite literally underlying, coal underground to maintain prosperity for this country. We're going to have to get better at being savvy about thinking about what makes an attractive city for people, for money, for firms, for innovation. And what is it? Well, it's smart places. People don't experience a city as a whole, as a monolithic concept. They experience the places of a city. My experience of Sydney is informed by the places I spend time, and waterfronts, particularly this waterfront, but any improvement district around the waterfront is obviously one of the best places that Sydney has to offer.
Yeah, my sense is that that in a lot of places where BIDS were kicked off, they were responding to challenges or a burning platform at the bottom level of the Maslowian pyramid. It was about safety. It was about being able to clean the streets and those sorts of things. And we are fortunate we don't have to. Mostly we don't have to deal with a burning platform at that level. And therefore, you're talking about something that's a fair bit more sophisticated in terms of realising opportunity rather than dealing with risk.
Yeah, although, I mean, it is a fair point, right? That Darling Harbour probably in the 80s and 90s had that burning platform, and we managed to respond to it. We just probably didn't put the connective tissue around the major infrastructure investments that we've undertaken.
Yeah. Michael, incredibly encouraging, the Minister's announcement today. I think particularly in really driving forward on the momentum that's been created, and a lot of that's been created under you. I think, the partnerships that you and your group have been able to catalyse, not least through uptown grants that the Waterfront company's also been a beneficiary of. It's exciting. Do you see those partnerships, some or all, being inclined to convert to more formal improvement district type arrangements under legislation?
Yeah, and in the last 4 months, we've spent a reasonable amount of time thinking about this in the context of the vibrancy reforms that the Minister touched on earlier, and I think it's the trite, but let's remember it for a second, never let the pandemic go to waste, never let the crisis go to waste, and the chance for the new government to come in and try and re-explain a more universal approach to districts or precincts. We use these terms interchangeably, and where we've landed really is, I think, and it's probably a bit of an evolving discussion, not least of all with the change from business to community, as the Minister touched on, is it's useful to have fundamentally a collaboration between businesses in a place. Like, you just get better outcomes as a result. And for us, the Uptown program, it keeps getting mentioned, really was built with business improvement district theory in mind, but to take away the sting using the pandemic and COVID response funding that then Minister Ayres was able to secure, we were able to take that off the table and say, well, government will just pay for it for a little while. So business collaboration piece, number one. And then the question then becomes, well, what regulatory interventions can you make to shore up, further support, give certainty to these models? And so at that point, there's a live discussion around community improvement districts, but a very moment in time around special entertainment precincts, which are almost a special case use of that concept, right? And so there's legislation in the House right now for a legislative framework for special entertainment precincts, which already exists but improves the model. Now, then, so I guess if you just sort of think about this from a more general perspective, business collaboration or community collaboration fundamental, then what regulatory interventions can come in and support things to give certainty and whatever the outcome, whether that's for profit on the one side or community benefit on the other. Yep. I think it's a really exciting time, and we get to really kick the tyres on a model that can perhaps transcend both of those things, both community and business.
Yeah. I mean, I remember going back even a couple of years, you were talking about purple ribbon accreditation and the way that, I think you told me that generally works through a bid type entity in the UK, and the opportunity that therefore an ID or a set of IDs might afford to the 24-hour economy agenda more generally. Is that still?
Yeah, like my KPI really is to go and plant purple flag across multiple nighttime hubs. Where do you plant it? Well, you need something to stick the flag in, so to speak. And in the absence of business improvement districts, it is, and we've had to explore this in the pilot process. Accredited now YCK, which is essentially a business improvement district or community improvement district. Parramatta CBD, no, not. And Howden Street, Lakemba. And the pilot's underway, but what you find is that you need like these collaboration models in place, like almost as, I call them soft infrastructure. Everyone loves hard infrastructure because you get to cut a ribbon on it, but no one gets a prize for the soft infrastructure approach, which is, where we're at. What happens if you can't build anything? I often say, well, you have to use what you have to generate better outcomes. And we've gone into this with a mindset of need. We need for profit to have these structures. Where we're finding through the Uptown program, the community reaching is we want. Like it's just a better model. Why wouldn't you do it this way is really where that's arriving. And so, yeah, the ambition is to, I guess, accelerate this thinking in this really short window we've got, and ultimately achieve the objectives of the 24-hour economy strategy, but also, wider business goals at the same time.
Jason, I think sometimes there's a misconception that somehow this collaboration's a Trojan horse for development, and I've always felt very comfortable from its outset that that it's a much bigger picture than that. Where does you've been at the table, and actively supporting this with Lendlease from its outset. Where do you see the value from Lendlease's point of view, and how do you respond to the agenda and the program that you see the Waterfront precinct in particular progressing?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I mean, my first comment would be collaboration in terms of where investors are going has become more important than ever before, because I think all of us who have been participants in the New Sydney Waterfront Company, who have joined the board, have realised that if we coordinate our investment priorities together, we will get a larger investment outcome from the place. So from our perspective, at Lendlease, we look at very large precincts. I think for Sydney, this, Kate said it earlier, it's a wonderful city, great base for growth. We can do better. And we is not just the government. It's we, the private sector, can collaborate together and do better. And I think one of the things that the Business Improvement District mechanism offers is that collaboration opportunity. And I think particularly in the waterfront, where so many of us have got that much investment going in at the moment, we can go with what we've got now. But there's also the future investment that's coming in the precinct, whether it's White Bay, whether it's Roselle Bay. There is so much capital, both public and private, coming in, that really we don't have a choice. We have to work together. We have to collaborate together. We have to have a unified vision, because otherwise we will miss the opportunity. And I think one of the things I will reflect on, having been on this journey now for a few years with the New Sydney Waterfront Company, is already we're seeing those of us who have been collaborating here start to collaborate on other projects as well. People often think developers don't like each other and we don't hang out. That's not true. We do, and we do like collaborating, and we do like co-investing. So that's certainly on the one hand. And the other is the government side of things. Certainly, there's an opportunity here, and I really welcome the Minister's comments and yours as well, Michael, that this model can be expanded across Australia. It's not just here. It could be other parts of this city. It could be other cities altogether. There's been a tremendous response, I think, from Australian governments to this concept, and I think Jace is partly responsible for that, having been so enthusiastic in his advocacy for it. But I will say also internationally. So we had the Tokyo Municipal Government out here last week. Geoff kindly hosted them, interested in a business improvement district for Tokyo Bay, trying to coordinate better themselves. And you think the Japanese are awfully organised on these things. They are, but they see opportunity for more activation, right? We have the Malaysian government here next week at TRX, Lendlease's largest urban regeneration project, again worried about governance, post-development, how do we actually get the place happening? And I think Kerry's team gave us a presentation earlier, and she made a comment that really stuck with me, which was that really what you want in a precinct is 70% of things to be unscripted. I think the Minister referenced it as well. You want to be able to come.
And for that to be really good.
And for that to be really good. You want to come to a precinct, you want to bring your friends, your family, if they're visiting to a precinct, and you want to go to completely unscripted things. And the ritualistic bar, that you might go to at the end of the day, or you might take a friend to. That's what we really need in Sydney, again. And I think we can capture it again, and I think this whole model gives us the opportunity to do that.
Renae, last but not least. You're coming at this from a different perspective again. I think we estimate that about 30% of the CBD's hotel accommodation, hotel rooms are in this precinct. A whole bunch of them are in your portfolio. Where's, what's driving your, and you really have lent into this, so.
Well, I think everyone's spoken about collaboration. That's really, really important and it's critical. And I think we've tried this before. And I think the balance of the 50 members of all being very different is really great. So the collaborative coming together. And I think because sometimes, previously when we've tried things in different areas and different precincts, the larger companies, people sit back and wait for the larger companies or the names to drive it. And I think, and that needs to happen, that needs that participation, but it needs everyone to come together. And I think certainly for something like this Waterfront, it's about experiences. And that's what people are wanting. So whether or not they're coming here for a conference, it's about what else can I experience whilst I'm here. And I think that was a perfect example of South by Southwest. Whoever was here, it was amazing last week. So whilst I was walking into ICC to attend a particular, let's just call it a conference, it was part of the whole thing. But then I got hijacked and followed the music on the way back, and it took me a while to get back to my car. But these are amazing things where we want people to be able to come to something or come to one thing, but then all of a sudden there's this experience of they've just got lost in this place and precinct, and so many other things have been on offer. So I think one of the approaches Accor have always taken with our partnerships has been, because we can look at things very singularly. We do have budgets, we have fiscal responsibilities to owners, and that all will stay the same. But there is a level, if we can everyone rises up, then the experience for customers is going to be even better. We're going to get more people coming back. And let's be honest, that's easier to market to people who have had a great experience than trying to acquisition costs. I'm sure everyone in this room knows how expensive it is. So if we can come together, because we're all targeting the same people to get here. So I think the collective in terms of marketing, the experiences that we can bring together, and all of us coming together, because ultimately they might not come to our hotel the first time they come, but if they've had an incredible experience and found something that maybe they didn't know, they're going to come back.
Yeah, I think things aren't going to get any easier generally at the macro level, globally, Australia, Sydney, and I think in that context, providing structured ways for people to work together is potentially even more relevant.
Absolutely.
I mean, I had a general question for and I'm intrigued at this. And I've got my own opinion, which I'll keep. Do you think, all of you and each of you, do you think that we naturally collaborate well in Sydney?
Oh, great question.
No.
I agree, no.
No, we don't. And it's, I remember giving evidence at the nighttime economy panel and basically said that the thing we need to borrow from Melbourne is the postcode is the collaboration spirit. But that is definitely changing. I've no doubt on it. The Uptown program experience has been, you're an idiot for trying this. Why would I participate? Because you're not paying me. Yeah. I'm like, sure, then don't talk to me. Yeah. Eventually, so round one, and it's all about capacity, right? No cash on the table. So my view is, you want to be part of the city, why don't you do some work? If you really care about Sydney, why are you asking me for cash? So first round, a lot of tension, eased out. Second time round, 20 more teams, default behaviour. It'll be really fascinating in the next little while to see, in the land of the chess beaters, which we all are, it's about my restaurant, my bar, I'm the best, I'm the biggest, etc. You can even hear the narrative a little bit here in present company, because it's so hardwired into, that's why you're in Sydney. But the reality of it is that the next generation, Y, Z, are prone more to collaboration in any case. And what you're seeing really is a generational shift towards those behaviours. And so in terms of where we win, it's when people default to the thinking of, I want to open up my business in this district because, as opposed to, I want to open up my dream bar. And I can already see that happening. And so I think there's, again, going back to it, it's like, let's lock in these behaviours and make them trademark. If you are in business, you do in Sydney, collaboration is just how you do it.
But I think it's a bit about changing our thinking as well, right? Because if you, from a marketing spend point of view, we do everything, because this is the way we've always done it, to get an ROI for that particular, action or activity or whatever we did. And whilst I get that that's important, but sometimes we have to look at how we can do things and collaborate together to extend our reach, because we only have so many dollars, and how we can come together and extend that and look at the greater good rather than just one particular ROI every single time. Because that's where it's going to get harder and harder, because ultimately we're all going to end up competing, and it's just going to continue to get much harder to do.
I think one of the great motivators and the drivers of urgency in the waterfront is this recognition that there's so much development happening at the same time. And one of the things I think we've been guilty of in the past is to build one-out things that look nice and then bemoan the fact that they don't actually work very well in combination. And then we spend 30 years getting Sydney Olympic Park to work.
Which is why this language of community versus business is topical, right? Because what you're describing there and what the Minister tried to articulate previously was the value to community as opposed to the profit to a business, and that's the shift. And you should be able to have both, right? That's the
you
point.
should
But
be able to
it's
have both.
Where we're putting the emphasis, it's a live discussion, which that's where these concepts are resonating.
Maybe Jason, you might unpack that a bit further. I mean, there has tended to feel like there's supposed to be some sort of natural tension between, business, government, and community in a place, and I don't know that that's necessarily, a given.
The outcomes are not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, I think if you find in a city, the most successful cities are ones that are balanced in terms of community outcomes, business outcomes, employment outcomes, societal outcomes. This is not a new concept. I mean, we all know this, right? So in a precinct, the same thing applies. We were talking earlier about this concept of a precinct. What you don't want is a precinct that ends up being sort of, exclusive, where you can't access cheap eats, where you can't access automatic culture, where you can't have a 24-hour play, where you can't turn up because of a particular piece of legislation or whatever, like a lockout law, right? Like that's not what anybody wants. And I think what all of us have learned, I think, in property over many years now is you don't get your community right, you don't get your development right. If your community outcomes are poor, you will not get your returns, your investment. You will not get your ROI. It doesn't matter how much marketing you do, right? So
I'd go even further and say over the long term, the only way that you get benefits for any one of those groups, government, community, business, is through them all getting good outcomes. The reality is, you can do some sort of slightly mercenary short-term gains, but over the long term, a business will only be successful in a thriving community, and a community will only be successful with a thriving, business sector.
And you only get those sorts of combined outcomes or a precinct outcome if there is the collaboration that Michael's been talking about.
And the killer is the inertia. Change is hard, and change is hard when things are going okay. Without a burning platform, change is even harder. And so actually it's all these groups coming together, and a model like a community improvement district helps you get over some of that inertia, partly by locking people in, but also by partly creating a structure that allows people to, meet each other in the middle and not sort of stand at 20 paces.
Oh, look, I think, I agree that we're not great natural collaborators, and one of the...
I don't agree, by the way, but
Well, that's good.
I mean, I think inertia plays a role, right? But I do think that there are lots of instances in other spaces where Sydneysiders are fantastic at collaborating.
Yeah.
Look, this is a bit trite, but this is the most successful multicultural community in the world. That is, I would happily debate that with anybody, but I'd say that is more or less true. And that is in part because we are able to engage and collaborate on making a city that works well for difference.
But I will say as well, if you think about the last 500 days, when the board and the wider partnership has come together in this structure, we are far more coordinated in our vision and far more coordinated in terms of what we want to do, and we are collaborating a lot better than before we were formed. So that in itself demonstrates the point.
I think there's always been intent.
Yeah.
I think the intent has been there and it's been very strong. It's just that this has also helped us, I guess, with a framework.
Convert the
Again,
intent into actual.
Absolutely.
You're coming 45%, the other
Exactly.
40%. This is the 10% that gets you between.
Yep.
Well, look, I think that's a lovely note to finish on. Can you join me in thanking our panellists?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thanks, Geoff.